Hi, and welcome to First Bite, a nation's restaurant news podcast. I'm your host, Holly Petrie. Today is Thursday, November 10th, and here are your top stories. First, Panera Bread is opening its first digital and to-go stores in New York. The new New York City store is one of two smaller store formats designed to urban neighborhoods that Panera will be rolling out. Second, AF & Co. and Carbonate predict 2023 food and beverage trends. The marketing and research group puts maitake mushrooms and baked Alaska among hot items in the coming year. Third, Mendocino Farms is set to pass 50-unit mark. The fast casual brand is scheduled to open its 51st restaurant on November 22nd in Dallas's Preston Hollow neighborhood. Fourth, Noodles & Company gains some momentum from lower chicken costs. The company is coming out of Q3 with accelerated sales and improved traffic trends. And finally, Stacy Peterson-Andros is stepping down as Wingstop's technology officer. The executive is resigning effective December 2nd to become CEO of a private, non-competitive company, the brand says in SEC filings. Now let's dive into a trending story from our website. 2021 was a great year for the coffee bakery segment, and with all of the 10 biggest chains seeing an increase in system-wide sales, some as high as 55.7%. In the annual Top 500 report, powered by Data Central, Nation's Restaurant News breaks down the top 500 biggest restaurant chains in the U.S. by system-wide sales, domestic units, and average unit volumes. The full data also identifies chains by segment. So here we've broken out the 10 biggest coffee bakery chains by U.S. system-wide sales out of the 24 that appear on the full list. Following the worst of the pandemic, the segment came roaring back in 2021 as consumers returned to their offices and therefore their routines. Of the 24 total coffee bakery chains in the top 500, only 5 saw system-wide sales decline last year. Of the top 10, only one chain differs from the 2020 list, with a growing brand swooping into the rankings at number 8, replacing Daylight Donuts, which fell to number 11. I sat down with managing editor Leigh Anne Zinsmeister over coffee. What else? To discuss coffee chains. Listen to our conversation here.
So, in my quest to analyze the top 500 data, I took a look last week at the top 10 coffee bakery chains in the US for 2021. As always, this is by system-wide sales, and we're using Data Central's Firefly data. There were 24 coffee bakery chains total in the top 500. And I say coffee bakery because while these are mostly your classic coffee shops, I mean, we're sitting here drinking Starbucks, obviously the biggest coffee chain in America. The coffee bakery category also includes some chains that are more focused on the bakery side. So that's your Krispy Kremes, places that are maybe more known for donuts, etc. It's one category. Anyway, of the top 10 of these 24 chains, all of them had sales growth in 2021. There was not a single outlier, and of all 24, only 5 saw sales dip. So 2021 was a great year for coffee. One of those chains in the top 10 saw sales growth of 55.7%. So great stuff for coffee. Couple reasons that could be the case. The biggest thing that I'm thinking is that people really got back into a routine in 2021. In 2020, people, the coffee segment did okay, all things considered, but people weren't going to the offices every day, and so they weren't swinging by Starbucks every morning on the way in. They weren't popping by Dunkin'. We did at one point see sort of a shift in that day part. People started trying to escape their children or ducking out after meetings, and we saw an influx of traffic at places like this in like the 10, 11 o'clock hours in 2020, but in 2021, it really came back to people's routines, and I think that is primarily what we are seeing here in this data.
Well, it's interesting because we've seen in a lot of our Q3 earnings reports that there is more of a shift back to this urban recovery, this urban movement. Do you think that has something to do with the coffee segment as well?
I don't know how much that has to do with coffee specifically. We may see that reflected in the 2022 data when that starts to come out. I actually think a lot of this increase is probably more from the suburban consumer. I think people in the suburbs and in, we obviously talk about a lot about New York. That's where we're both based. But people in other cities and states have been going back to the office 5 days a week for well over a year now, and I think that's where a lot of these coffee sales came from last year. So in the top 10 chains, coffee bakery chains, we only saw one new one in this list. We saw Scooter's Coffee pop in. It bumped out Daylight Donuts, which did take a sales tumble. So Scooter's Coffee, new to the top 10. I believe it came in at number 8 last year, so not a bad showing. And this is an emerging coffee chain that we've been talking about a lot this year, honestly. They've been building out their C-suite, and I think we're going to start seeing some big things from Scooter's Coffee.
And so, what do so you and I are drinking peppermint mochas right now.
We sure are.
And so what do kind of the holiday sales have to do? I mean, we just wrote, Menu Tracker had 5 QSR companies that had new holiday beverages. I mean,
just last week.
Yep. What does the holiday beverage sales have to do with the fact that these companies are rising up in sales? I mean, it must have some impact.
Holiday beverages are huge for the coffee segment. Starbucks just reported their earnings last week or the week before. They saw a big same-store sales increase in Q3 going into Q4, and they only expect it to get bigger this quarter. They say that the biggest driver behind their sales bumps are their younger consumers. Gen Z is going to Starbucks. They've got buying power now. The more younger consumers coffee chains can attract, I think the better they're going to do. And the way that Starbucks and others are attracting those consumers is with seasonal beverages, whether it's fall or holiday stuff, and with customizable beverages. We saw the Hocus Pocus drinks. Things like that are really going to bring in the next generation, and that's where coffee chains especially are going to start seeing their increases come from.
That's so interesting. I mean, so when we talk about the coffee chains, we really talk about coffee itself. Is there any sort of room for coffee chains that are smaller to come into this segment? I mean, you talked about Scooters coming in. Is there any room for new chains to come into the segment, to come into the top 10?
I think there's always room. I think coffee is one of those things that people are always gonna want. When the economy's bad, people might give up going out for a nice casual dining dinner. They're not going to the steakhouses as much. They might skip McDonald's a couple nights a week if they've got kids, but people are still going to drink their coffee every day. And so I think there's always going to be room for success in the coffee segment.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of First Bite. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new one. Until then, stay up to date with all your news on NRN.com.